A scream tears the apartment, and the night swallows it like a wound that will not close. Ava said, "Liam, hold on to me," and her voice shook like glass on tile. Eric's eyes flashed and rage blurred whatever tenderness once lived there. He shoved past, and the door cracked the frame as it slammed like thunder. Sirens threaded the distance, thin needles sowing dread through the silence. Liam said, "Mom, is it my fault?" and she pulled him close until breath returned. She tasted metal and old fear, the kind you bury under work and bills. Eric shouted through the door, "You'll hear from my lawyer," and his steps faded down the hall. The lamp flickered, and the room leaned with it, shadows long as regrets. Ava said, "We're safe," though the word felt borrowed and brittle. The hallway smelled of rain, and a wet newspaper bled ink at the threshold. A photo lay face down, and she did not dare flip it yet. She steadied her hands and counted Liam's heartbeats against her coat. The sirens dimmed, but the storm gathered inside her, heavy and certain. Silence swells until the fridge hum sounds like a storm trapped in metal. Ava said, "Let's sit," and the couch sighed as though it remembered better years. Liam's fingers found a loose thread, and he wound and unwound it like a spell. The lamp cast a gold circle that refused the corners. A clock ticked as if counting down to something nobody wanted. Ava said, "We will make a plan," and the word plan felt like a raft in heavy water. Her phone buzzed, then stopped, a nervous heartbeat on the table. She thought of bills, daycare, and a long walk back from every bad decision. Liam said, "Will he come back?" and the question floated like a paper boat. She answered softly and let certainty borrow her mouth. Rain softened to a hush that matched the room's new shape. The air held the scent of wet concrete and old coffee. Ava said, "We keep the door locked," and she rose to check it again. Memory slipped in uninvited, wearing the scent of fried oil and late shifts. Ava said, "I can stay another hour," and the manager's smile was all calculator. Buses came late, and the night always charged more than the fare. She learned to carry groceries and hope in the same torn bag. Liam slept on her shoulder once, small and warm like a promise. Eric laughed in early photos that now felt like postcards from a country that sank. He said, "We're fine, even when the floor sagged under debt." A friend once warned her, and she did not want prophecy. The kitchen sink clanged like a bell, and she counted tips like prayers. Ava said, "We built this alone," and the truth burned and soothed at once. Every step ahead had a shadow walking behind it. She listened to the present breathing and set the past back down. The phone lit the room with a cold square of certainty. Ava said, "Not tonight," but the message waited like a courier at the door. The subject line carried a lawyer's name and a date that felt like a cliff. Words stacked into threats dressed in etiquette. Eric said, "This is what's best," inside a screenshot that still smelled of him. She read the lines twice and found the same trap in different shoes. Liam stirred and the couch cushion sighed, asking for peace. Ava said, "I will answer tomorrow," and her thumb hovered over reply. The rain had ended, and a distant car engine threaded the block. She saved the document and watched the icon spin like a warning light. Her breath slowed until her chest stopped echoing the slam of the door. The night drew close, but it did not feel infinite anymore. Morning would come whether she invited it or not. Ava said, "We draw a line," and the room seemed to nod. She made a list in her head, sturdy as a locked drawer. Call a lawyer, talk to school, document everything, breathe. The air thinned, then steadied, and she felt the floor take her weight. Liam murmured, and she smoothed his hair like a promise sealed. The bent latch waited for a new screw and a better day. She pictured a door that closed softly, and never again like thunder. Ava said no more running, and the words fit like work boots. She gathered the broken frame and set it aside for later truth. In the hush, resolve arrived without ceremony. She folded a blanket over the night and let the future sit at the table. The office hummed with fluorescent fatigue, every click of keyboards cutting her thoughts thin. Ava said, "I'll finish this report tonight," though her eyes traced the clock more than the page. Her manager leaned over, smile polished like glass, and whispered about deadlines that had already expired in spirit. She felt the weight of bills folded in her purse, silent reminders of promises yet unpaid. The hum of the copier roared louder than applause she would never hear. A coworker laughed too loudly at something harmless, and it rang like judgment across the cubicles. Ava said, "I'm fine," when someone asked, but her voice cracked and betrayed her. Liam's face flickered in her mind, sitting at school with his crayon-stained fingers. She straightened her back and forced her pen to keep moving. The clock's red hand swept forward, and she carried the heaviness like another task on her list. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and whispers, a place where truth hid beneath small talk. Ava stirred her cup, though she hadn't added sugar. Claire said, "You need to know something," her eyes darting toward the window like escape routes. The words slid out soft but sharp, about money unaccounted for and papers signed in secret. Ava said, "You knew," though her voice cracked on the word. Claire shifted in her seat, guilt painted across her still smile. The rain outside smeared the glass, and Ava counted each streak as if truth could be measured in drops. Claire said, "I didn't mean harm," but harm had already sat at the table. The cafe's warmth pressed against her skin, yet she shivered from within. Ava set her cup down, porcelain clinking like a gavel. The betrayal was not shouted but whispered, and whispers often cut the deepest. Homework sprawled across the table, crayons rolling like runaway thoughts. Liam said, "Why is Dad mad?" his pencil frozen above the page. Ava steadied her breath and said, "It isn't about you," but her words felt thin as tissue. The boy traced half-shapes on paper, stars that refused to close. The light bulb hummed above, flickering once like hesitation. Ava reached to brush his hair, her fingers trembling like they carried secrets. Liam said, "Do we have to move again?" his voice no louder than the scratch of graphite. The weight of custody hearings pressed against her ribs, but she smiled as if the world had not cracked. She folded his workbook shut and said, "You just need to be you," though doubt chewed at every syllable. In the corner, the toy rocket leaned against the couch, tilted like a ship in storm. The knock came with authority, 3 sharp taps that split the evening. Ava opened the door to a woman in a tailored suit, folder pressed tight against her chest. Miss Grant said, "We need to review some matters," her tone smooth but weighted. Ava stepped aside, her heart ticking louder than the hallway clock. Liam peeked from behind the couch, eyes wide like moons. Papers slid across the table, each word binding like rope. Miss Grant adjusted her glasses, gaze neutral yet piercing. Ava said, "I provide for him every day," her voice rising against invisible judgment. The pen on the folder gleamed, waiting for signatures that tasted like surrender. Silence stretched until it bent. Miss Grant said, "We will be thorough," and the phrase echoed like a verdict not yet spoken. The diner smelled of grease and old songs, neon buzzing above like an anxious thought. Ava slid into the booth, the vinyl cracked under weight and years. Sarah said, "You can't fight this alone," her hand firm on Ava's wrist. Ava whispered, "I've held worse storms," though her eyes betrayed the tremble inside. The waitress poured coffee with a smile, too tired to lift the room. Sarah leaned closer, voice sharp with loyalty, reminding Ava of every night they had patched each other with words. The jukebox stuttered, coughing out a love song too sweet for the hour. Ava said, "He won't break me," and her friend nodded as if to nail the vow in place. Outside, the streetlight buzzed, holding back the dark. For a moment, strength was not a shield but a shared cup, warm in her hands. The courthouse steps loomed like cliffs, each one daring her to fall. Eric said, "You'll never win," his grin sharp under the morning light. Ava tightened her grip on the folder, papers trembling though her spine refused to bend. The air smelled of stone and rain, history pressed into every brick. She wanted to scream, but Liam's face flashed in her thoughts, holding her steady. Eric's lawyer adjusted his tie, a silent predator watching from the shadows. Ava said, "The truth doesn't need a mask," though her voice cracked as the words left. A bird startled from the railing, wings slicing silence like a warning. Eric stepped closer, lowering his tone. "He's my son too," his breath heavy with accusation. She swallowed the urge to strike back with fire. Instead, she lifted her chin and climbed, each step a battle against gravity and memory. The office blinds sliced sunlight into pale bars, trapping her like a caged shadow. Her supervisor said, "Budget cuts," the phrase rolling with practiced indifference. Ava's stomach dropped, bills flashing like unpaid ghosts. She said, "I need this job," but her voice felt too small for the room. The hum of a broken fan filled the silence, blades struggling to breathe. A stack of reports slid toward her, evidence of her efforts ignored. The words "job loss" tangled with custody in her head, the two striking like a double storm. He shuffled papers as if she were just another line item. Ava said, "You can't cut me, not now," though desperation painted her cheeks crimson. The walls leaned inward, filing cabinets closing in. He didn't look up, only muttered, "Decisions aren't personal." But her world tilted as if everything was. The school hallway smelled of crayons and floor polish, echoes of laughter spilling like ghosts. Liam tugged her sleeve, whispering, "They said Dad's better." Ava knelt, eyes locking with his wide ones. "You are my world," she said, words trembling like glass. Posters lined the walls, faded rainbows and safety drills. A teacher passed, offering a smile too quick to matter. Liam's hand clenched tighter, the innocence in his grip warring with the confusion in his gaze. She said, "Don't listen to whispers," but whispers always clung tighter than truth. His crayon drawing peeked from his backpack, a house split by two suns, both trying to claim the sky. Ava's throat burned, but she steadied her voice. "We'll make it through." The hallway lights flickered once, as though the building itself sighed. She rose, carrying his questions on her shoulders. The apartment door opened to Miss Grant's measured knock. She stepped inside, folder once more in hand, her shoes quiet on worn tile. She said, "We need to talk," her tone slicing the fragile calm. Ava braced herself, leaning on the table as if furniture could hold her resolve. Liam peeked from the hallway, clutching his toy rocket like armor. Miss Grant laid out forms, her pen tapping a rhythm that bled control. Ava said, "We have stability," her words defiant but laced with fatigue. The silence between them hummed like static. Miss Grant's eyes softened briefly before hardening again. She said, "We must ensure his best interest," and the phrase clung like a verdict unspoken. Ava's heart raced, but she stood taller, refusing to bow under the weight of scrutiny. Evening folded itself into soft neon as the cafe buzzed with easy laughter. David said, "You deserve a break," his smile reaching where her defenses faltered. Ava sipped tea, the warmth seeping into her tired bones. She said, "My world doesn't allow breaks," but her lips curved despite herself. The hum of quiet music filled the gaps, notes chasing shadows from her thoughts. David leaned closer, voice softer. Sometimes strength is letting someone in. She studied his face, searching for cracks, but found only earnest lines. Outside, the rain tapped playful rhythms on the glass. Ava said, "Trust costs more than I can pay," her words trembling between walls and windows. For a fleeting moment, her shoulders eased, as though the storm paused to let her breathe. The night air was sharp, carrying whispers that clung to the skin. Ava stood frozen, as Claire spilled secrets in a single breath. Claire said, "I signed the affidavit for Eric," her eyes wet but her voice steady. Ava's chest tightened, betrayal folding over her like smoke. Every late-night coffee, every word of comfort, now stained by this revelation. She said, "You were my anchor," the syllables breaking apart like glass dropped on tile. Claire reached out, but Ava stepped back, the space between them heavier than any chain. Cars passed on the street, headlights flashing judgment across their faces. Claire whispered, I thought it was the right thing, but the lie tasted like ash. Ava turned her face, not to hide tears, but to stop herself from shattering. The silence carried more rage than words could hold. And he growled. Sleep did not come, only fragments of thought stitched together with worry. Ava sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing grooves in the wood. She whispered, I can't carry this alone, though no one was there to hear. The clock ticked with cruel precision, louder with each beat. Bills stacked beside her, silent witnesses to her unraveling. She stared at her phone, David's name glowing in the dark, but hesitation locked her thumb. The apartment was too quiet, as if holding its breath. Liam shifted in sleep, a soft murmur breaking the stillness. Ava pressed her palms to her eyes, forcing back the tide that wanted to drown her. She said, Tomorrow, I fight again, and the words became a fragile shield against the dark. The courtroom buzzed like a hive, voices low and stinging. Eric's lawyer slid documents across the table, the ink heavy with accusation. Eric said she's unstable, his voice dripping with smug certainty. Ava clenched her jaw, refusing to bow to venom dressed as fact. The judge's gavel struck once, silencing the hum. Ava said, I have provided every day, her voice steady but fierce. Liam's name echoed in her chest, reminding her why she stood unbroken. The lawyer pressed, citing missed payments, old wounds, shadows stretched into weapons. Ava's hands shook, but she met Eric's gaze and held it until he looked away. She whispered to herself, truth holds, though doubt pressed against her ribs. The room leaned heavy, but she would not let it crush her. Home became battlefield when Liam asked, Why do you fight so much? His voice small but piercing. Ava knelt, swallowing the ache, brushing his hair back with trembling hands. She said, Because you deserve peace, though her heart cracked under the weight of words. The toy rocket lay between them, paint-chipped, a silent casualty of their storms. Liam's eyes filled with questions she could not answer, each one sharp as broken glass. The walls seemed thinner, carrying echoes of arguments louder than lullabies. Ava pulled him close, his heartbeat quick against her chest. She whispered, I will not let you break, the vow filling the air like a prayer. He pressed into her, still carrying innocence she fought to protect. Sarah arrived without knocking, sliding into the room like a storm with open arms. She said, Don't let him drown you, her voice sharp enough to slice through despair. Ava smiled weakly, collapsed tugging at her bones. Sarah sat across from her, gaze fierce, hand gripping hers with unshakable loyalty. The room smelled of rain and reheated coffee. Ava whispered, I don't know how much I have left. And Sarah shook her head, eyes burning with defiance. You've survived worse, she said, each word a nail pinning strength back in place. The silence after was not heavy, but steady. Ava exhaled, the weight loosening, if only slightly. Together they sat as night crept against the window, two women refusing to bend to storms. Ma! The knock was hesitant, a ghost wrapped in flesh. Ava opened the door and froze at the sight of her estranged brother. Mark said, I couldn't stay away forever. His voice cracked with regret. She gripped the doorframe, memories rushing like floodwater, childhood laughter soured by abandonment. He stepped inside, the smell of rain clinging to his jacket. Liam peeked from behind her, confusion etched on his small face. Ava said, Why now? Her tone sharp, brittle with years of silence. Mark lowered his eyes. Because I heard what he's doing to you, words heavy with guilt. The air thickened with secrets too long buried. She wanted to slam the door, yet her heart beat faster with fragile hope. The past had walked back into her home, carrying truths she wasn't ready for, but could no longer escape. They sat across the table, shadows long under the single lamp. Mark unfolded a bundle of old letters, their edges yellow with time. He said, I watched from a distance, shame bending his words. Ava's breath hitched, anger and longing colliding in her chest. Liam fiddled with his toy, eyes bouncing between them. She said, You left me when I needed you most, her voice sharp as broken glass. Mark's eyes glistened, I thought silence was safer. A confession that felt like betrayal all over again. The air smelled of dust and old regret, heavy enough to choke. Ava pressed her palms to the table, steadying herself. She whispered, "You don't get to rewrite history," though a part of her wished he could. The lamp hummed, and silence screamed louder than their words. The storm inside her chest matched the one raging outside. Ava paced as rain lashed against the window. Mark said, "I can help you fight him," his tone desperate, like a man begging for redemption. She spun toward him, fire in her eyes, and "What will it cost me?" each word a wound. Liam pressed closer to her leg, sensing the weight of grown-up wars. Mark's shoulders sagged, only trust. But trust was the currency she no longer owned. Lightning cracked, flashing the room in stark whites and blacks. And the general had stayed. Ava's pulse drummed, torn between anger and the faint glimmer of relief. She whispered, "You chose silence when it mattered," but her voice faltered at the edge of forgiveness. The storm rattled the glass, mirroring the chaos inside her. The night blurred into fragments of memory. Ava sat alone, her head heavy in her hands. Echoes of her mother's voice slipped into the room, soft and distant. The voice said, "You always carried more than your share," a reminder wrapped in love and sorrow. Ava whispered, "I can't do this," her words swallowed by the hum of silence. A faded photo on the shelf seemed to lean toward her, its smile both comfort and wound. She closed her eyes, the weight of generations pressing through her bones. Liam's soft breathing from the next room tethered her to the present. She said, "I fight because you taught me to," as if speaking into the air could stitch her spirit back together. The night held her grief and her strength in equal measure. Dawn broke with muted light, soft against her weary face. Ava stood at the window, her reflection caught between past and present. Mark joined her, holding a cup of coffee like a peace offering. He said, "Let me stand with you," the plea quiet but firm. She studied him, the years of absence etched into his lines. Liam stirred awake, padding softly into the room, rubbing his eyes. Ava turned to him, her hand reaching instinctively for comfort. She said, "We will face this together," though the word "together" felt fragile. Mark's shoulders eased, a man finding a second chance in her words. The city stretched awake beyond the glass, unaware of the battles waged within. For the first time, the horizon did not feel entirely unreachable. The courthouse buzzed with nervous energy, each shuffle of papers slicing through the silence. Ava stepped into the room, her heart pounding like a war drum. Eric smirked across the aisle, whispering to his lawyer. Ava whispered, "Not today," her voice trembling but firm. The judge entered, gavel striking once, pulling the room into order. Sunlight filtered through high windows, cutting dust into golden lines across oak benches. Ava felt every eye on her, every whisper pressing against her skin. She inhaled and steadied her grip on the folder, her weapon built from truth and sacrifice. Eric leaned back in his chair, confidence dripping like poison. Ava's gaze did not waver, fire sparking beneath exhaustion. She whispered again, "For Liam," sealing her vow. Eric's lawyer rose, voice sharp and polished. He said, "She cannot provide stability," waving documents like weapons. Ava's chest burned, but she lifted her eyes to the judge. She said, "I have fought every day," her voice shaking, then steady. Eric nodded along with his lawyer, arrogance painting his face. The silence afterward carried the weight of doubt, lingering in the air like smoke. Ava tightened her fists under the table, nails biting her palms. She thought of nights balancing bills and days, skipping meals so Liam could eat. She whispered, "He will know the truth," her vow aflame against the cold. The lawyer's words cut, but Ava's resolve grew sharper, forged by love stronger than lies. The questions came fast, each one like a stone thrown. Ava stood at the witness stand, palms damp against the wood. The lawyer said, "Do you deny missed rent?" his voice sharp as glass. Ava's throat tightened, but she steadied her breath. She said, "I provided everything he needed," the words carrying pain but also pride. Eric leaned forward, smirk widening, his eyes mocking her with every syllable. Ava thought of Liam's laughter, the sound cutting through the fear. She pressed her shoulders back, refusing to let shame drown her. She said, "My son is safe with me," each word breaking chains that had held her for years. The silence afterward felt heavy, but it was hers. Liam sat quietly on the bench, his small frame dwarfed by the room's weight. His drawings slipped from his backpack, a picture of a house split by two sons. Ava saw it, and her breath caught. The judge glanced at him, eyes softening briefly before returning to her notes. Ava whispered, "He is my reason," though the words never left her lips. Liam looked up, confusion painted across innocence, then leaned against Sarah, who had come to support them. Sarah squeezed his hand, strength lending strength. Ava's heart broke and rebuilt in the same moment. She knew the fight was not about pride or revenge, but about keeping her child's light from dimming. The moment came, silence pressing the room flat. Ava rose, her heart pounding, and faced the judge. She said, "I am not perfect, but I have given every breath to my son," her voice carrying across the chamber like a bell. Eric's smirk faltered, his mask slipping. Ava's eyes burned, but her voice grew steadier, forged in fire. She said, "He is my world, my fight, my reason for standing here," each word striking like iron. The judge leaned forward, listening, weighing every syllable. The room fell into stillness, the kind that holds its breath before truth arrives. Ava exhaled, her body trembling, but she did not falter. For the first time she felt unbroken, her voice no longer silenced. The hush struck first as the judge lifted her eyes. Ava gripped the table and felt every mile that brought her here. Eric stared at nothing, his jaw locked like a door jammed shut. The judge spoke with calm certainty and set the path ahead. The words landed like rain on hot stone and turned to steam. Sarah's hand found Ava's shoulder and steadied the ground. Liam watched from the bench, holding his breath like a caught star. Ava said, "We made it," and the room finally let air return. Eric shifted, the mask gone and the weight of truth settling. The gavel fell once, and the future opened like a narrow but real door. Outside, the day felt lighter, though the sky was gray. Reporters buzzed, but their noise slid off like rain on stone. Eric stood apart, reading the order with a hollow stare. Ms. Grant nodded once and spoke about steps and responsibility. Ava did not gloat because healing has no appetite for revenge. Mark said, "You are not alone," and the words planted roots. Liam squeezed Ava's hand and anchored her to this bright edge. Sarah lifted a palm to the cameras and created a small circle of quiet. Ava said, "We go home," and the syllables felt simple and clean. The storm did not vanish, but it finally moved behind them. Silence at home felt new, like a room repainted in light. Ava washed a single cup and watched suds climb and vanish. She touched the bent latch and smiled at the memory of mending. The list in her head shrank to breath, rest, and breakfast. She traced the scar in her story without turning away. The voice of doubt knocked and found the door gently locked. She said, "I forgive the parts of me that broke to survive," and the air held it. A breeze lifted the curtain and carried out stale fear. The city hummed without demanding anything from her heart. In the quiet, she gathered herself like a soft and steady tide. Sunday arrived with the smell of batter and a song on low. Liam said, "Can we make rockets from pancakes?" And she laughed for real. The pan hissed like a friendly little storm. Mark knocked and brought berries, then stayed to wash dishes. Sarah sent a message that read, "We're proud of you." Ava stacked pancakes and built a small tower of joy. Liam clapped, and the sound patched seams she thought were permanent. She said, "This is our new morning," and let the words live on the air. The clock ticked softly and kept time without threat. Joy did not shout. It sat down at the table and ate. Night folded the day into a quiet promise. Ava stood at the doorway and listened to Liam's steady breath. She sat beside him and smoothed the blanket until the corners held. The city's distant siren faded like an old habit letting go. She whispered, "We are stronger now, and we keep choosing us." The room answered, with the hush of safe walls. She pressed her palm to the wood that once shook and felt it steady. The future did not roar. It glowed like a small lamp. She stood and carried the calm into the hall. Behind her, hope slept and asked for nothing more than morning.